She's not happy. She's purring now, but you know, go under there. There's stuff on the trunk. She likes to sit on the trunk and look out the window. And the window is open and the dogs are barking. And hi, how are you this week? I once again spent my weekend doing a lot of sewing. I did do a few things that weren't sewing. Like I started finally airbrushing the dinosaurs, but I ran out of a green that I like to use. So I stopped in, it's the Walmart paint, and I got more of this green today. And sorry, loose hair. My pink I had mixed up before, but it was way too diluted, and even though I was adding more to it, it still was too wet. So I got more pink. I'm not out of pink yet, but I got the pink just in case. And I also went ahead and grabbed this purple because I didn't have a good purple to mix up for airbrushing. So I also have the blue down there and a yellow-orange, I think it's called tangerine. So I will eventually get to airbrushing the dinosaurs, if anyone's still interested in those. And eventually I will get to sewing things for sale and trade and thanks, but I'm still mainly experimenting and working through Susan cloth and refining that one. I did do a little bit of Dremel work on a doll. I have a custom character that I kind of want to make. I'm not going to go into it too much. It's not a character that I'm really invested in. I just really like the design. But she needed to be a little shorter. So I cut about 1/4 inch out of this live body, and then I put it back together with, well, I had never cut a live body apart before. And in this space where I wanted to cut it and take the height out, first I cut the top. I had to do this with a saw because it's real hard to use the Dremel at an angle. And I cut it apart on the upper cut and took it off, and there was a cross brace holding this clear rubbery plastic thing. At first I thought it went all the way through. I could see there was a hole in the structure inside. I thought it went all the way through. I thought maybe it was the articulation for the waist. So I decided to leave it in place because I really, to make this reduction work, I needed to cut that out, but there's plenty of room in this for that plastic thing to fit. So I carefully cut the cross braces out, and then the whole thing came out. And that's when I figured out what it was. It was a rubber piece to put against the top of the articulation for the waist to give it some friction, some tension, so it wasn't super floppy. So at first I thought, well, I can just replace it by putting hot glue on that spot. But the hot glue did not apply any friction at all. So actually what I ended up doing is taking the clear rubbery plastic piece, holding it on pretty tightly and hot gluing around that. And then when the hot glue dried, it's decent friction still. And then I used more hot glue to tack this to this, just enough time so that I could put the plastic weld on it to tack it a little more permanently. And then I used the piece that I cut out to take the hide out, cut that up into little tiny pieces, put it in my little jar with a little acetone, and let that melt into the acetone goop. Then that's what's actually this big blobby area here. So I obviously still need to go through and smooth that out, but I mean, that is the plastic that this doll's made out of. This joint is not going anywhere. And I think I like this proportions, the shorter torso and the live body. I put my regular live body away. But we'll see. I need to reroute the head and make the head a different skin tone to actually match this body. And I want to get these hands out and put some gloves in, and then I have to make all the clothes, and then maybe even her, it's a video game character that the kiddo likes. And I will just, I don't know, do you want a clue? This would be the hair. I think these shoes are perfect for her. She does have the brown skin. The gloves, I'm not going to have the right color gloves. I will put some paint details on this. At her waist is not an exact yellow thing, looks like this, but it is a yellow thing. And I actually think this head is going to work because of her complete lack of detail in her mouth and her eyes. And I think either you know who the character is or you don't, but you probably don't because it's not a super popular game, but the kiddo will probably like it once I'm done. But I might like it too because, like I said, I think the character design is cute, and she has bandages all over, which I think is a nice touch. Another thing I did that was not sewing was I tried a Blythe dress on Edna, and the shoulder width, chest width is really good. It's obviously this is like knee length on Blythe. Queen of Squids added Obitsu arms and lower legs to her Edna, and it looks really good. So I will, like I said, eventually I will try to figure out how to give her better articulation, but I know I'm not the first person to do it whenever I do. Speaking of Queen of Squids, I went ahead and made her jeans for Fresh Dolls. I did not follow her instructions. I didn't even download her instructions. I will put the link to her pants below so you can try this out too. It is a really good fit. I did deviate from a few things because I didn't want the stripes, such as they are on the waist, to be really at an angle, so I didn't do things the way they're supposed to do them. I also made the cuffs a little bit tighter. And this is, of course, Susan cloth, and this is Susan cloth, and brief deviation from where I'm going with her. Since I took that jumper, the wax print dress off of her to make the pants, I gave the wax print dress to Nichelle here on the articulated, non-made to move articulated curvy body. I have been checking for articulated, the made to move curvies. There are no curvy dolls in Nashville as far as I can tell, at least not this side of Nashville. So she got that dress. And she got a repaint. I'm going to move her, you can see the shine in her eyeshadow. As I said in every picture of her I posted, she's based as much on Japanese fashion dolls as she is on Instagram beauty bloggers. And I really wasn't sure if I was liking this repaint until I painted on the baby hairs, and that just that made it, I don't know if come alive is the right word, but I'm pretty happy. It's as my usual, I am more concept and execution. This is not a good repaint, but I think the spirit is good. She has, I like her. She has some personality. And then another random Susan cloth dress I did was this. To this, there was a flaw in the printing, a printing error on this. There's no green for a stripe. So I actually thought that looked a little bit like a border print. So I used it as a border print. And this bow is hiding. Hello, Floof. Boobies. Kitty. This bow is hiding some slightly unfortunate pink flower placements. Hopefully hiding it. Also, it provides a nice contrast with the dots to the floral. And the only other completely random sewing I did was that little porcelain doll I thrifted weeks ago. I actually was going to try to make her dress into something. I was going to take the original really ratty trim off of it and put a proper fastener on it and make it into a dress wearable by other dolls, but the cloth was so old and delicate that it just ripped. But I did take her bloomers and cut them apart and lay them out and try to make a pattern out of them because they look like they were going to fit fashion dolls. And this was actually the first iteration of that I did. It's actually not a great fit, and it's not, obviously not poofy bloomers. Fluffy, voluminous bloomers. But it's a really simple pattern. I might go ahead and get it. What are you doing, Floof? I might get it to where I'll share it because it's easy. And that segues into dresses to share. I have been working on that dress more with the gathered top and the high-waisted flared out skirt. I scanned it. I got the dress to where I wanted it. That was at this point. Before this, my biggest problem was the back was too low. And then I tried sewing it with smaller seam allowances so it would fit a modern body, and it worked out. And what are you doing, Floof? Are you fighting with the floor? Sorry. She's so funny when she rolls around. Kind of scary too. So, can you hear her claws digging into the carpet? What are you doing? So I scanned the pattern pieces and I traced them in the illustration program with the vector lines to be this all smooth. And I printed that and I tried sewing with that as my pattern instead of my original much penciled over pattern, and that's this one. So I'd say it works. The back doesn't group, like I said, originally my biggest problem was the back hung down really low, but the back is fairly level. And this is with 1/4" seams, so it'll be easy for other people to reproduce. So I need to make a few more edits on the pattern, just as far as notes of what's the front and the back and where the fold is that I forgot to make before. And I need to write up the instructions. I need to make it all pretty. So I'm not saying it will be soon, but I have started it. Once it's all done, then I will share it, and I will put links everywhere that I can think of about sharing. So yes, and here it is on the Made to Move body. I know I've been showing it on older articulated fashionistas bodies before, which is actually has a smaller waist than Made to Move, but this dress I'd say probably fits the Made to Move body a little better than the fashionistas articulated body. So, but I had an idea for another variation on this dress. It's like, what if we made the skirt longer? And the first one of those that I made was this one. Of course, this is all done with Susan cloth. If I haven't mentioned it's Susan cloth, it's Susan cloth. So this was my first variation. Again, I didn't say this. Another variation was using, okay, 2 variations on this. One is not contrasting the prints. It's using one print for the top and the bottom. And the second variation is making it longer. And since my pattern pieces take up most of a page, I don't think I have quite enough room for all the instructions to fit on the one page. I think I'm going to go ahead and make the longer skirt length part of the pattern, so you can either make it longer or shorter. And there's no variation, I mean, there's nothing weird. All you do is cut it longer or shorter. And I would put the lines in for the shorter length. So I made this with completely 1/4" seams, and it fits the older gymnast style Barbie body pretty well, which again, the gymnast body has a larger bust and smaller waist than modern, like Made to Move bodies, but it fits this one pretty well. So then the next thing I wanted to make from this pattern was again using a pretty floral Susan cloth, all one print, but this one I wanted to fit an older superstar body Barbie, which would be this gal. And the way I made this, again, same pattern with the 1/4" seams on the skirt, but my, whatever my seam allowance is, like, let's see, 3/16 inch? Just slightly smaller seam allowances on the top, and that fits the larger, older style bust really well, and I am super happy with this dress on this doll. Again, you wouldn't have to use a lace or facing to turn the hem, but it's a pretty circular, so in my mind it's easier to sew lace on it and flip it over. But it needs to be narrow lace, or else when you flip the lace over it does weird stuff, because since the skirt is a circle and the lace is straight, you do need thin lace. But this lace is actually, hold on. Another thing I did over the weekend is we are selling the kiddos Skylanders. So I took the 3 shelf storage unit on wheels that the Skylanders had been in, and I put all my lace into that. It barely fits. Don't think this means that I'm gonna buy more lace because I have more storage, because I don't know how I got that little suitcase zipped, because it really doesn't want to fit in this 3-drawer shelf unit thing, 3-drawer storage unit. Anyway, so what I used for this lace was, hold on, I need to get to where it beyond I cut it off. Actually, the very edge of this lace, you can see where I cut it off. So it's about, let's see, 1/4 inch plus, seam allowance of a 1/4 inch plus whatever this edge is, to be mock narrow lace. Because I know it can be hard to find really narrow lace. And it only recently occurred to me that I could cut wider lace down to be narrow lace to use for doll stuff. You just have to find an interesting edge. And I did a few things to the doll. The first thing I did was I painted over her eyes. I think I've commented before on how I did not like the way her original eyes were painted. Yes, she's supposed to be the Wicked Witch of the West. She's supposed to be looking down at a certain pair of slippers. However, when people look down, they generally move their whole heads to look down. So her head was up, but her eyes were down. So her pupils were at the bottom, and all the highlights were above the pupils, and it just looked weird to me. So I painted her eyes over completely black, and I also widened her irises a little bit, slightly outward to the side. And I think that's softened her expression a lot. Another thing I did to her was I heat reshaped her hands. That's where you turn, I've never done this on a gas stove. I've only done this on an electric stove. You turn the stove on so that the element gets hot. You hold the big paddle flat Barbie gymnast hand over it, and you keep testing, and as soon as it's soft enough to turn, you fold it over like this and then dunk it in some cold water to set it. It is very easy to leave it over the heat too much, and then the plastic starts to blister and bubble. I have done that. So I was extra careful with her. I mean, I started trying to turn her fingers when it was still very cold and hard plastic a lot earlier than I do with most dolls, because I did not want to blister and bubble her plastic. And I also took a drill bit. I didn't put it in the drill. I did this by hand and drilled a hole for rings. And I took a little bit of dark gray foam, pinned it to her head, and brushed her hair over it to make a sort of a bouffant. And then, actually, when I caught the hair in the ponytail, a little bit of a ponytail in the back of her head, I did it off center. But, I mean, this is lumpy enough and unprofessional looking enough that I'd struggled to get it even this smooth, so I did not want to go back and redo it completely just to get that ponytail straight. So I went through my fake flowers for doll use box, and I pulled out a bunch, and I twisted their wires together and cut the wires off, and tacked them together quickly with thread, and then jabbed them all into the head with somewhat coordinating straight pins. And I think it's extra funny that this purple rose matches the purple on the dress fairly well, and it's an odd purple. Actually, all purples are hard to match. That's something my mom observed, and I just saw it when I was young. And I don't know if it's really true, but it's always stuck with me that purple seems to be the hardest to match. So I've got that in my mind, that purples are hard to match, whether they are or not. But this purple, I'd gotten a grab bag of sewing supplies, sewing notions, that included a bunch of fake flowers. Actually, that's where all the lace came from that started me making the lace dresses a month or so ago. And I need to get back to that to sew for offerings and thanks. But there were flowers in there that had obviously been white that the person had painted with acrylic paint. And that's actually what this is an acrylic painted rose that matches really well. So I'm very happy with how this came out. I mean, I'd been saving this cloth, and I used most of it that I have, not most of it that Susan sent, because today I actually put a whole bunch of Susan cloth into a box and mailed it off to Queen of Squids to play with, and I did include some of this, because Queen of Squids is really good at making really pretty clothes, so I really wanted her to have what I think is a really pretty cloth. And so after I got this dress done and was really happy with it, I decided it was time to go back to my original idea. This is the first dress that I made, kind of freehand improvising around the patterns that I had, but thinking this either might not work out or I might want to keep going with it. So I traced off the shirt and I drew up the skirts, and I really didn't like the way this fit, but like I said, I thought it was an idea, and I worked through all of them, and then this is the final version that I made. The differences really aren't that big, but they're enough that I'm really happy with this one now. So, and I'm glad I saved the bits, and I will, like I said, I will eventually get this pattern out for other people to try, and I really look forward to seeing how other people do it. Like I said, what I really wanted most using this gingham was the way the shirt flares out, the top flares out before you gather it in, so you actually see you get kind of an arch to the stripes, and that's what I really wanted to emphasize. And I don't think it happened too much on the original, so I'm glad that I did that. And then, let's see, do I have time? Yeah. I was a little late starting this because I was out fighting with the rose bush. I mean, I got some roses off of it, but I really need to trim it because it's a monster rose bush, and it came off the stakes when it rained, and it's like all slumped to the ground. But when I say monster rose bush, it has some monster thorns too, and I probably should put on some heavier dutier clothes before I start fighting with that thing. But I went into the thrift store yesterday. I didn't find dolls. I found boots that I'm wearing that I love, that also I should not be gardening in. And I didn't find any dolls yesterday. And I went to a different store today, and I found a doll. I thought, oh, she's interesting. And I picked her up and looked at the back of her head and said, oh, she's Madame Alexander. But I don't know enough about Madame Alexander. She's a taller, bigger doll, plastic, not the highest quality. I mean, it's like blow molded plastic for the torso. And there's like this weird problem with her arm that I don't know if boiling it will fix it or not. So I got home and I looked her up. Well, she didn't have a price. I got to the register and the guy said $2. And I'm like, I don't need this doll, but you know, I need to be saving for the doll show, which is in 10 days. But if I saw this doll at the doll show, she wouldn't be $2. Whoever she is, I don't know who she is. I didn't know who she is. I got home and I looked her up, and she's a Madame Alexander Leslie, who every eBay listing for Madame Alexander Leslie puts rare all over it. And since there's only there's probably less than 10 listings for Madame Alexander Leslie right now, and on eBay terms, I guess I walked into a thrift store and found another rare doll. So, excuse me. She's only been home a few hours. I obviously haven't dressed her yet. So, I mean, she still has her original hairnet and some bobby pins holding it in, even though it's a horrible mess. So, I will get her some clothes and see if any of the shoes that I have fit her, and get some nice pictures of her eventually, and I will get the pattern made eventually, and I will get the dinosaurs painted eventually, and I painted the skin tones of a couple dolls eventually. That's, not eventually, over the weekend. That's part of the reason I ran out of this before I got to the dinosaurs. So, I have projects. Hopefully, I can stay away from the thrift store next week, if only because next weekend I will be going to the doll show, and we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching.